My man Lucas, who should be our Koine Corner creative director, who comes up with all the greatest topics, has a question about 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 19. Let's take a look at that verse in the ESV. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Now, Lucas notes that in that second phrase, the discernment of the discerning I will thwart, that the NIV has the intelligence of the intelligent I will thwart. And he wants to know which of those two readings is to be preferred from the original. And we're going to take a look at that. But first, let's talk a little bit about the verse as it stands by itself. This is a quote from Isaiah chapter 29, verse 14, and you'll notice that it starts with, for as it is written. Most of the time when you see for as it is written, it's introducing a quote, right? So this is a quote from Isaiah 29, 14, and this is poetry. And in Hebrew poetry, there's an interesting dynamic when you get a couplet like this. So there's two phrases that are joined together that form a couplet, and by and large, the couplet says the same thing in slightly different ways. So two slightly different ways of saying the same thing. Why would you do that? Because it enhances the understandability of the message. If I say it one way, you might not get it. If I say it two slightly different ways, when you compare and contrast the two, and when you synthesize the two, you come away with a fairly straightforward understanding of the concept. And that is what we have here. He says, so in Isaiah, the Lord says, I will destroy the wisdom of the supposed wise ones, and I will thwart the discernment of the supposed discerning ones, or supposedly discerning ones. So let's take a look at a different example of Hebrew poetry and this notion of how both phrases in the couplet are saying the same thing. This is a very famous example, gets misquoted all the time. People say pride goes before the fall. And in a sense it does, but only because of the truth of this poetic couplet reality. So let's take a look at Proverbs 16, verse 18, again from the ESV. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So pride and a haughty spirit are essentially analogous, right? A person who is prideful has a haughty spirit, and vice versa. And a fall and destruction are sort of analogous, right? You were on the heights, you were doing great, then you fell from that place, your position has been destroyed, right? These are analogous notions. So for the purpose of discussion, again, the point here is that the two parts of the couplet, although worded slightly differently, are saying essentially the same thing. So let's go back to 1 Corinthians 1:19 and let's take a look at the quote from Isaiah in Greek and unpack it a little further, okay? So, apollo tein sophian ton sophon. We'll start with the first part of the couplet. Apollo is future active indicative first person singular. I will destroy, or I shall destroy. Tein sophion is the accusative case of sophias. It's wisdom in the singular. I will destroy the wisdom. And then we get a participle with the article, ton sophon, the wise ones. I will destroy the wisdom, singular, of the wise ones. So the people who are noted for being wise, their wisdom will be destroyed. Now let's go down to the second part of the couplet. Kai tein sunesin ton suneton atheteson. So kai is and. Our verb here is at the end. Notice that the couplet together starts with a verb and ends with a verb. This is a poetic device. And the second verb is atheteson, which is I will render. It's also future active indicative, and here again it's singular. I will render invalid, I will thwart, I will void. What will he render invalid? The discernment or understanding. The NIV uses intelligence, which is tein sunesin, our direct object of I will render invalid. Of whom? Of ton suneton, of those with discernment, of the discerning ones. So I will render invalid the discernment of the discerning ones, or the intelligence of the intelligent ones, or the understanding of the ones with understanding. So here, again, the poetry gives us the same idea. The wisdom of the so-called wise ones, the discernment of the so-called discerning ones, right? In both cases, it'll be destroyed or it'll be rendered invalid. The poetic couplet says the same thing in two different ways. But to really get a handle on what he's talking about here, we have to know why Paul invoked Isaiah 29. And to do that, we're going to unpack verse 18 of 1 Corinthians 1. And I'm not putting up the ESV or the NIV. We're just going to translate it together, and because there's some emphasis that I don't want us to miss by eliminating a grammatical device. So let's take a look at it together. Ho logos gar, ho tu stauru, tois men apolumenois, moria estin. So we'll start with the first part. Ho logos gar, for the word or the message, ho tu stauru, the one about the cross or the one of the cross. So the message of the cross, for the message of the cross, then we go all the way to the end of the verse. Estin is moria, foolishness. We had this as a recent word of the week, moria. We get moron from this word in English. Tois men apolumenois, on the one hand, to the ones who are perishing. For the message of the cross is, on the one hand, foolishness to those who are perishing, to the ones who are perishing. Now we look at the second part of it. Tois de sozomenois, but humin, tois de sozomenois humin, but to we who are being saved, dunamis theou estin, it is the power of God. So it's critically important to not dismiss this men day construction. Men on the one hand this, day on the other hand that. So Paul takes a singular issue. What is that singular issue? The message of the cross, the word about the cross. And he says that message about the cross, using this men day construction, is going to divide humanity into two distinct camps. There's going to be people who are two different groups of people, and those people are divided by their perspective, their understanding, their discernment about the message of the cross, and they are defined by two very different outcomes as a result of that opinion or perspective about the cross. So on the one hand, he tells us, on the one hand, there are people who are perishing. And the people who are perishing, they see the cross, or they are exposed to the message of the cross, and to them it is moria, it is foolishness. Those who see the cross and only see foolishness are described as those who are perishing. But on the other hand, there's another group, and he describes that group not as those who are being saved, but as we who are being saved. Hamin. He includes himself in that group. And he says when that group sees the cross, they don't see foolishness, they see the power of God. So one message, the cross, on the one hand, Those who see only foolishness in it are described as those who are perishing. But on the other hand, those who see the power of God in it are described as we who are being saved. He goes next from that and says, this is a fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah 29:14. Let's read it again. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. In the poetry, he says, the Lord will do a thing in the world. And when people are confronted with the thing, those who are known as the wise ones, or those who are discerning, or who have understanding, who are intelligent, their understanding and discernment and intelligence will be thwarted. Their wisdom will be destroyed because they see the cross and can't comprehend it as the power of God. They can only see it with derision. To them, this is foolishness, that God would become a man and would go to the cross in their place. Makes no sense to them. And he derisively refers to them as the ones with wisdom, the wise ones, the ones with discernment, the discerning ones, the ones with intelligence, the intelligent ones. They see the cross and don't get it. But we who are being saved see it and say, the power of God is manifest and culminated in this message about the cross. So, back to Lucas's question. Looking at our words of the week this week, sunesis, discernment, intelligence, understanding, perspective, suneton, the ones having discernment, understanding, intelligence, perspective. How should we interpret that? We should interpret it together with wisdom and the ones having wisdom, the wise ones, as being a stand-in for those who don't get it in this quote from Isaiah. Those who see the cross and miss the point, who only take it with derision. That's foolishness. It's less important which one of the words we use, and more important that we take the poetic couplet as a whole and see that Paul is invoking the quote from Isaiah to show us that there's those who gets it and there's those who don't. When confronted with the message of the cross, those who are perishing see only foolishness, but those who see that message, who hear that message and say, the power of God is revealed in this, they're classified as we who are being saved. So the specifics of the term, whether it be discernment or intelligence, are less important than the thrust of the message. When confronted with the cross, do you see foolishness or do you see the power of God? Because that's the difference. It is the difference between perishing and being saved. The message of the cross is the dividing line between those who get it and those who don't, according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 1:18 and 19. Now, for reinforcement of that notion, read 20 and the next several verses. And it's unmistakable that he's using this quote as Old Testament justification for this dividing line between those who get it and those who don't. That God presents the world with a message that is a divisive message, a divisive message, a message that makes you pick whether or not this is foolishness or the power of God. So, Lucas, I hope that was good in answering your question. I hope others found value. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit the like, share, subscribe, the notification bell, all that good stuff. And if you're getting benefit from Koine Corner and from the Word of the Week each week, please let your friends know so that they can watch. And it's very helpful with the channel. It lets YouTube know that there's value here so that they push our content to people who haven't seen it yet. So until next time, thanks for watching, and Karis Kairene Humin, grace and peace to you.